I'm Erica Hollingsworth, and you're listening to the F1 Podcast.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the F1 podcast. My name is Andrew Cleary, and this is season 5, episode 6 of the F1 podcast. Unfortunately, Jonathan and Erica could not come with us today on this epic episode 6 journey. So, unfortunately, you got me. So, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be recapping the Bahrain Grand Prix ahead of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix this weekend, and giving you my thoughts on what qualifying happened, giving you thoughts on the race as well as some interesting strategies that went on throughout this past Sunday and, you know, what's going on with McLaren in terms of Lando Norris. Who knows? Anyways, but first and foremost, want to huge thanks to Trinity Common for hosting the F1 podcast and our fans and our friends out this past Sunday to watch the Bahrain Grand Prix. We had an amazing group out there. To me, Trinity Commons is the best place to watch F1 in all of Toronto. Everybody in there is just such a fanatic of the sport and is really intelligent of the sport too. So it was a great time to be able to celebrate with fans, and we look forward to the next one. Jonathan and I and Erica will keep you posted on when that will be, but we do look forward to that. And again, huge thank you to Trinity Commons. So let's first talk about qualifying. Qualifying on Saturday. We had an interesting session where, unfortunately, in Q2, Esteban Ocon went out with a crash, so we created a brief red flag. But one of the weird moments of the qualifying, though, was happened in Q1, where Nico Hulkenberg unfortunately went off on the track on his qualifying time, the time that he set in Q1. He experienced track limits at, I think, turn 11, it was. Um, which was not investigated after Q1 for some reason, or even during Q1, which I thought was crazy. So the stewards catch this in Q2 and then decide to be like, you know what, we're going to delete his Q1 time and all of his Q2 times and relegating him back to, I think it was like 16th position to when he started with. But Alex Albon, who got knocked out in Q1, if if they caught that track limits earlier, Albon would have been qualified in Q2, giving him a chance to qualify into Q3. So this is just poor from the stewards. Like, how do you not review that after Q1 to make sure that everybody's classified goes through without any issues on their laps? And if they catch the track limits, then do it right away so that Albon has a chance to go into Q2 and qualify for Q3. It's just poor mishandling from the FIA stewards again. I mean, this is just the lack of consistency amongst their performance just across Grand Prix weekends is just, it's not there. And so that if you're to me, that's incredibly frustrating because that's a little bit of the integrity of the sport kind of, going away there. You'd think that they'd be able to catch that before going into Q2 and giving Albon a chance to do so, but I guess that was not the case. However, let's go into the final of the Q3. Piastri set the pole lap at a 1:29.841, which was pretty standard, I would say, for McLaren this past weekend. They were the fastest of all the sessions, just in terms of their pace. And Oscar had such a dominant weekend, starting off with this pole position, followed by George Russell, who's quietly being Mr. Consistent again in the, kind of pushing that Mercedes into another echelon of performance, which is great to see. He finished in P2 at like a 1:30.009, so a couple hundreds of a pace off. And then Ferrari had Charles Leclerc finishing P3 for qualifying, which I was loving it because I was based on my predictions this past week, and I had Charles finishing on the podium. It was a great start, followed by Antonelli P4, Pierre Gasly with quite the qualifying lap for Alpine, finishing in P5, Lando Norris in P6, and poor guy after the session really beat himself up in the media. And he tends to have a habit where he just continuously just beats himself up, almost to a point where it's just really negative. I understand being critical of your self performance and criticizing yourself, but when you're just that negative of tone with the media, it really is hard to see. Uh, and for me, that really does have a knock-on effect in terms of performance, just mentally overall, right? And to a really certain extent, that was kind of Perez or Checo last year, where I think just the car mentally got to him, and he was just had these really poor qualifying performances, and he kind of would beat himself up based on it. And Lando's in a really fast car. He's in the fastest car, mind you, and he's just kind of he's hurting himself on the mental mistakes. And this weekend was kind of one to show that his partner or his teammate is really for real and challenging for the World Drivers' Championship. And so we'll see. But I mean, Lando really needs to build back his confidence up in the car, and just it can't be so negative on with the media. Really, just you know, say, in my opinion, just address it quickly and then carry on and try to read back the thing into a positive light. Now we have Max Verstappen finishing qualifying at P7, and that's based on how poor this car is. And oh my goodness, we'll get back into this. We'll talk about it more after the race kind of analysis. But if you're a Red Bull fan, I would be scared really badly. And then we had Sainz P8, Hamilton P9, and Yuki P10. So that was kind of the grid to start. It was great to see Sainz qualify so high in the Williams, which is more frustrating because if you're Albon, you feel like you probably could qualify into that, position where you could be scoring points on a Sunday where it's like a P11, P10, P9, or even higher than Sainz, right? So again, the lack of action from the stewards in Q1 to assess Hulkenberg's deleted lap time really could have had an effect on this race. So we go into Sunday. Oh, so also, mind you, Russell and Antonelli did both receive a one-place grid penalty for entering the fast lane and the pit lane before the restart time was confirmed. That's a team issue, so I think that's why they gave them the one place grid penalty, right? So that kind of knocked Russell back down to P3, and then Charles to P2, and then knocked Kimi Antonelli down to P5, and then put Gasly into P4 for the final grid. So we talk about the race. Off the start, great start for Oscar Piastri. He kept his pole position while Lando unfortunately overshot his grid slot when he started. And oh my goodness, you had Max and you had George, which I was surprised George even saw. He looks in his rearview mirror and sees that Lando's over his grid box. And as soon as Max picked up, he was over that Lando was over his grid box position, like his tire was beyond like kind of like that yellow line slash, in over inside the white over the white, calls his radio right away to let them know. It was just such a quick reaction to it, kind of funny to watch. But yeah, Lando got hit with the 5-second penalty very early because it was quite clear that he was over his grid box position. But you know what? Um, Even though he's penalized for that sort of false start, he really made the places back. And it was he kind of did that early on, which was good so that when he completed his first pit stop, he was able to complete the 5-second pit stop or the 5-second penalty without um, putting him so far back in the track that he could again be able to overtake and get back into this fight for the win. Who I thought was really impressive this weekend from a racing craft perspective was Zantelli. Oh my God. Great, beautiful overtake on Sainz in lap two. And another amazing overtake on Verstappen later on in the race. I think it was on lap 20 when he had that beautiful overtake. But man, was he a victim of his team's lack of strategic ability this weekend, which you don't really say with Mercedes. Like to me, that's quite crazy to say, but they really put him out into poor positions this weekend. I believe when Antonelli first, he was like in a weird, he started on softs, then he went to mediums, but when he pitted, he pitted at like an uneasy time, so they got put into like a DRS train, so it was hard to overtake. And then he went on to small softs again, 5 laps before the safety car. And to think that like the soft like it had to have last like 30 laps, which was crazy because at the start, we had um Piastri who was, really pushing those tires in the first 10 laps and really ate at, especially that highly abrasive surface that Bahrain is. Suzuka a couple weekends ago was, cold, new surface, so you could really just hammer pretty much qualifying laps all race. Bahrain, you could not. It's abrasive. It was hot. The tires just got chewed through like nuts. And I was surprised that they put him on another soft. But again, op poor pit timing. He's back in the pack. And then when the freaking safety car comes out on lap 29, 30, or maybe 31, after Tsunoda put a hole in Sainz's side pod, that was kind of an interesting way to go. But he just he got, put on another case of softs and he got thrown back to like P17 when he came out. I was like, oh my goodness. And he was only able to finish up in P11 for a guy who started P4, had incredible racecraft, some overtakes that he had this weekend, to like have his team pretty much force him all the way back into P11 was tough to watch. And it's something that Mercedes has to take a look at and dissect what happened there. Because that was just really poor strategy for Mercedes this weekend on Kimi's car, but not the case, but otherwise Russell had some other issues, but overall, the race was kind of good. Started off, Ferrari was a little struggling on the mediums to start, and then they picked up pace around lap 10. And then there was like what I appreciate about this weekend is that there was aggressive tire strategies going on. Everybody, at one point there was a great collection or diversification of softs, mediums, and hards, which created some really great racing, some really aggressive overtaking opportunities, which was a lot of fun. But I was interested with Ferrari's decision to not. I know they were talking about going Plan B, but Leclerc wanted to do Plan D or Plan Delta, which sounded like it was going to be a one-stop strategy. He thought those memes were lasting pretty well on his car, and he just wanted to see because once the first pit stop came, when the leaders came out, it was based on like where Russell versus on Lando, based on Charles and Piastri, what they were doing. I think Leclerc wanted to see how their tires were performing, especially like on the soft or hard, get more data when he thought that medium was running well, and then they could have stopped a little later on and maybe give Leclerc better track position. But no, they decided to come in. I think it was around like lap 18. They double stacked with him and Hamilton. And it was interesting because Leclerc came out ahead of Ocon, Hamilton, or came of Ocon, which has kind of been in that train of the DRS because Ocon had yet to pit. And then Hamilton came behind Tsunoda, who's at the end of that sort of train because Tsunoda had yet to pit. So it was quite interesting in terms of how it came out. But um, it kind of led to the fact that, then there was that safety car around lap 32. How it was created was Sainz was getting overtaken by pretty much everybody in that race, which was really tough to see. I think he just kind of had enough of it, tried to really defend his position. And Tsunoda, well, the Red Bull had no front axle, had no back, support, really had no downforce, really just was a tractor and just, slid everywhere this past weekend. And unfortunately, I think Sonoda kind of slid his back end out. His um, back tire, I think, met the side pod and put a whole lot of debris out on the track. And they needed to have the safety car so that they could clean it off, which I thought was, an interesting way to like calm down the race. Well, of course, as every safety car does, allowed teams to introduce like other strategies with regards to their tires. And I thought there was some great battles at the restart then between Leclerc, Norris, and Hamilton, where Norris was kind of in the sandwich of Leclerc and Hamilton. And at one point, Norris would attack Leclerc, but he would give Hamilton an opportunity to attack. So it was kind of like Hamilton was going for the double overtake. But then Norris overtook, I think, Leclerc off the track out on turn 4, 5 area. So he had to give that position back, but was able to make it up later on in the race. But the amount of sparks that were starting on the restart, you're just wondering how everybody's plank survived. And evidently enough, Nico's didn't survive at all because he got disqualified after the race to go on. But nevertheless, it was great battling on track. Some really interesting results. By lap 38, though, we had George really suffering from electrical issues on his car. First, his transponder failed, so that's why they couldn't show the times accurately on the on this like on the TV with regards to where he was on track. And then that forced his team to override his DRS because the faulty desponder didn't allow them to pick up the timing so that then he could activate, so they could dictate when to activate DRS. So they had to, let him know over the radio when he could do that. But I'm sure that was annoying. And then when his transponder went out, it affected everybody else because at the end of the race, when Lando was trying to overtake George, he didn't really know if he was in the DRS zone or not because um, he wasn't getting the timing statistics or the timing data from George. It was quite funny because it was like, okay, use DRS, but make sure you're within the DRS zone. But nevertheless, despite all those failing issues and a brake-by-wire system issues, GPS was gone. Might as well take off the whole entire steering wheel was done. He finished P2. What a great drive for George in that case. And he made those softs sing for the last like 25 laps. Again, don't know how that happened, maybe because the track temperatures were cooling based on the night. But nevertheless, how it finished off, we had Oscar Piastri winning in a comfortable 16-second margin. I did predict that Oscar was going to win this week, and I thought it was going to be a 1-2 finish with him and Lando, but unfortunately, Lando's pit stop or as Lando's qualifying position plus the 5-second penalty hindered that ability because we had George finishing in P2, Lando finishing in P3. Ferrari with strong drives overall, though, despite differences in potential strategy. Um, Charles finishing P4, Lewis finishing P5, Max finishing in P6, despite the fact that the car again was pretty much a tractor all weekend and was just super hard to drive for their standards. Pierre Gasly finishing P7 in the Alpine, their first points of the season, which was really great. Esteban Ocon finishing P8. He had an incredible drive. Great strategies from Haas all weekend, which I thought was really great to see. They took risks, but they were calculated and they paid off well in terms of the pit stop strategy and where they would come out in traffic. It was actually really well done. So Ocon P8, and they were pacey. I mean, as it was clear with Esteban there. Yuki P9, which was his first points in a Red Bull, which is great to see. And finally, Red Bull have a second driver that are scoring points from the season, albeit it's 2 points. But hey, two is better than zero. So shout out to Yuki, and hopefully that's just the start of many more points finishes for him at the Red Bull team. And then Ollie Behrman, which I thought would be driver of the day. It was not. It was Lewis went from P9 to P5, but Ollie Behrman going from P20 to P10. Again, great Haas strategies. They were super fast, super pacey in that car, and Haas double points this weekend. Take a bow, son. Very well done. Yeah, and then, finishing off, we had Antonelli P11, Albon P12, Hadger P13, Doohan P14, Alonso P15, Lawson P16, Stroll P17, Bortolotto P18, Sainz with your retirement and the collision damage, and then obviously Hulkenberg was disqualified based on his plank where he had finished P13 to begin with, but unfortunately because of the excessive wear on the plank on the wooden plank on the bottom of this floor, he got disqualified. So, what were kind of my overall thoughts of Bahrain? Great question. Because I asked that myself too. Um, it was it was fun to see the variance in tire strategies. Uh, the softs went longer than I anticipated, and the mediums were good on certain cars. They just needed to warm up and like get through the first part of that graining so that the tires could really warm up and adhere to the surface. I thought the hard tire was complete dog shit. Verstappen had huge troubles with that in his second stint on tires to the point where he pitted for mediums the uh, on the safety car. Hamilton was on the radio saying these tires sucked. But Lando in the McLaren, again, the fastest car, was able to, get that hard to work out well for him. And I believe Ollie had softs towards the end, but he was able to use hard mid-game. It was really great to see the difference in the tire strategies. That's what we want because then it created amazing racing on track. We had some great overtakes, hell of an overtake again by Antonelli. I think he had two of the best overtakes all weekend. Um, Doohan had a really tough start, a really tough stretch because of the hard tire. He was in a points position with 10 laps to go, and then he just got overtaken and overtaken and overtaken and overtaken to the point where again he finished in, I believe it was P14. It was tough. But then again, he had a 5 second penalty for exceeding track limits, so maybe it was P13 that he would finish in. Yeah. Um, Liam Lawson had a tough weekend with a 5 second penalty on Stroll and then a 10 second penalty on Hulkenberg. I thought the 5 second penalty on Stroll was a little egregious in terms of the FIA. I mean, you're kind of just fighting for position on track. It's not like they both lost performance in the end, but I can kind of see considering Stroll finished back, you get the 15-second penalty is aggressive, but unfortunately that's just the way the case went there for Lawson. But if I have to be honest, uh, I am very scared if you're a Red Bull fan right now. I mean, to have Max basically not be competitive at all this past weekend. He wasn't competitive in qualifying. He was barely making through it in Q1 and Q2 and finished, started P7. He looked terrible, so bad on the hards to the point where he was like Esteban Ocon and that friggin' Haas was, keeping him at bay, which then allowed Antonelli to attack Max and overtake him on lap 20 there. So you can only imagine how frustrating that would have been on track just in regards to because there's no front end. The tires were sliding everywhere. It was just awful. And then to top that, they had some of the worst pit stops of the weekend. Now they had an issue with the lighting system so that they couldn't signify when they were done. Like I think it was in the first pit stop, first windows of pit stops. They just had an issue with the tire lighting or with the lighting to let them indicate when to go. But I mean, in the second window, impossible getting the front right off for Verstappen. That led to a 6 second pit stop. And at one point, he came back out in P20. P20. This is a four-time world champion and he's coming back on track in P20. Oh my God, what are we doing, Red Bull? So, and after the race, they had a meeting. It was Horner, it was Marco, it was Wash, it was some of the senior technical team. Because Max has a clause. If he's out of the top three, if he's out of the top three at any point in the season in terms of the World Drivers' Championship, he could leave the next season. And if you're a betting man, and maybe I'm a little biased because I'm a fan of this team, but we're gonna have a Honda power engine and Aston Martin next year, and you have an Adrian Newey car. Why not go to Matt? Why not go to Aston Martin Max if you're wanting to get out of the Red Bull fit, right? Like they are very worried at Red Bull, as they should be, because their car is nowhere near where it needs to be competitive on track. Because if Max isn't in that seat, you're looking at what Yuki did at P9. He finished behind one, two, three, four, five. They were the sixth fastest car this weekend, finishing behind McLaren, finishing behind Mercedes, Ferrari, Alpine, and Haas. Like sixth fastest car for a Red Bull. And it's just gone downhill since 2023, 2024. We talked about with Tyler a couple episodes ago, just about how poor the car is performance wise. And there just seems to be no answer for what to do. So I say again, like if you're a Red Bull fan, I'd be very worried. Um, McLaren fans, I really think Oscar is the guy. He's the one that puts from a championship driver perspective. He's very he's like Lando in a sense. He's very fast, great racecraft to one up. But what I think what Oscar has over Lando is that Oscar doesn't care as much as Lando. And mentally, that's huge to have in a season, right? As they say in Ted Lasso, you have to have a memory of a goldfish sometimes when it comes to racing or it comes to sports, especially in F1 because you need to put away the short-term losses and really just build on your team. And Oscar has been able to put away that short-term issue that he had in Australia with falling outside of the points because of spin. And he's come back and he's won two of the next three races. And he's really putting it to his teammate, Lando Norris there. In the sense that I think Oscar's a faster driver than Lando currently, or in better in form. So, if we're still on this debate of two number one drivers, I think Oscar's got to be the 1A and needs to be the priority, despite the fact that Lando's still 8 points ahead of him in the championship. I think based on form, you got to give it to Piastri. I really do. I really do believe he's the guy, and he's the one that could definitely win the World Drivers' Championship in that car. Will Zach Brown and Andrea Stella see it that way? I don't know. But in my opinion, that's what you need to focus on. You need to focus on maximizing points for Oscar because, over these past couple of races, he's really been able to showcase um, his medal. Like a P1 finish in China with, I believe, with Lando finishing P2. Norris beat him in Japan P2, P3, but again, a P1 and a P3 finish. If it wasn't for Oscar's P9 finish in Australia, he would be in the lead. He'd be in the championship, plain and simple. So that's why I think, if you look outside of those standings, the that is where they are at right now in terms of McLaren. But I want to hear from McLaren fans if they think they agree. Ferrari, I think that was a great weekend. I would love to hear John's opinion on it, but I thought they were competitive overall. I thought if they listened to the Delta strategy, maybe they could have finished in the podium for Leclerc, but again, who knows? I think a P4 and P5 finish was super important for development there. And just for team overall morale. I know it's not a podium finish, but to be honest with you, George Russell was just super competitive despite all of his car issues this weekend. Um, he was able to make the Mercedes sing, and to the point Antonelli was too, just to the fact that his team completely screwed him over in terms of strategy. Anything else? I guess like Aston, yeah, Aston Martin to go from like a podium finish 2 years ago at Bahrain to P15 and P17, like a minute behind the win. It's nerve-wracking to a point because I think we need to focus on the fact that this car is not Adrian Newey's car, and they've confirmed at Aston Martin that Adrian Newey's not touching this car this year. This is a Dan Follows card, and maybe Dan is put in a position right now where he's just not getting the resources that they need for 2025 to make this car good. Because they're spending maybe some of the cost cap on 2026, which I think is a reasonable maneuver here. Lawrence Stroll has a ton of money, and I get that this is a very short-term pain that he has to go through. But to be honest with you, you need to give Adrian as much technical wind tunnel time as necessary. We're always going to be at the cap anyways because money, Daddy Stroll is going to spend the money, right? The money's not the issue. It is getting the resources, the technical resources that Adrian Newey needs from either cost cap perspective or from wind tunnel time perspective to make this 2026 car sing. If we're here next year and this is the same result we get, I am now concerned. I'm not concerned right now. I think this is a year we kind of quote unquote tank for those types of resources. But is it going to be frustrating to watch? Absolutely. Because they did not competitive at all. But unfortunately, that's just the way it goes. Uh, Kick Sauber again, not competitive at all, but again, we're talking about Audi next year. And then Racing Bulls, same idea, just didn't really have a fight all weekend. But huge shout out, I guess again, huge shout out to Haas for just an incredible double podiums or double points finish this week. And I really thought they did a fantastic job in terms of making that car sing with the strategy and maximizing the performance out of it and getting a P8 and P10 finish, which was great. And they're still now fifth in the midfield. Well, I guess the fifth in the constructors, and I guess they're the top of they're the cream of the crop in the midfield, which is great to see. Um, Sorry, just looking through my notes here. I guess my final concerns, not final, my final assessment of Bahrain was the directive of F1 TV. Oh my God, how do you not show Oscar finishing or crossing the line there at the end of the race? He is the guy that's winning the race. At least put him on the main screen for when he crosses the line, not the side box. I get there's a rate. I get there's a fight in the back between two British drivers. You almost kind of wonder where that's going in terms of the directive. Are they just focusing on the British drivers because they feel that's the best narrative? But I mean, You got to show the guy crossing the line. Like that's crazy. And then also at the end of the race, they had the video footage of Kimi Antonelli's car, but they didn't show the pass that Verstappen had to make on Gasly in the final turn to win. I thought that was nuts. How do you not go to that battle? That battle's for P6, not for P11 or P10. So it's just like I don't understand who is running the show in terms of the director of showcasing the cameras, but they need to go. Like they need someone who understands like where the key moments of the race are. And no, it's not like, oh, we're seeing that Verstappen is closing on Gasly. Maybe we should switch to that as opposed to watching Kimi just kind of glide in P11 for the win. Or better yet, oh my gosh, the guy who's led the entire race pretty much, and it was a 16-second gap to the field. Why don't you just show him cross the line? You got 16 seconds to show put it in the side box. He would look like Lando Norris and Russell are going because they went through the last, case of where they could overtake. It was pretty much going down that one side straight, and there's no way Lando's overtaking there, in that regard. So it's like I don't know. I just don't get some of the decisions as to why they didn't show Oscar cross the line, why they didn't show Max overtake Gasly at the end. We heard it on the commentary, but I mean, like, why not show it on TV? I don't know. Anyways, that is my assessment of the Bahrain Grand Prix. Jeddah is this weekend. I don't know what the hell Red Bull's going to be doing this weekend. I have a feeling it's going to be, again, McLaren's going to be the fastest car, but who knows? It's a street track. Should be exciting. Are we gonna have different tire strategies? Who knows? Reaching out, we'll do our predictions before the Grand Prix. We'll post that on Instagram. But I want to say thank you so much for listening to season 5, episode 6 of the F1 podcast. My name is Andrew Cleary. It has been a pleasure giving my thoughts to you. Comment your thoughts below or on YouTube or send us Instagrams messages on what you thought of the overall race of Bahrain. Do you think um, Oscar should be considered the number one driver, like the 1A driver over Lando at McLaren? And what the hell is going to happen to Red Bull and Max Verstappen in the coming weeks? We won't know until Jeddah, but we can't wait to see. Follow us on Linktree for all of our podcast socials, and we will see you next week where we give our recap of the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. Take care.